Hey, Dr. Yerby here. In this video, we're going to be talking about scope and scope creep and determining what to collect and what not to collect. All right, so when you're starting an investigation, you need to understand what you're there to do. You have a certain amount of stuff that you're there to complete, no less, no more. The term scope creep, you probably heard it in project management. It's essentially you set that you're going to build, say, a tree house, but if you go and build a mansion instead, is that a successful project? I would say no, because you went way beyond the scope. You went way beyond the plan. So the same thing in your forensic examination. You need to know coming into the examination what you're there to do, what types of activities, what types of evidence, the amount of time, the amount of resources that you're there to find. If you find unexpected evidence, you're likely going to need to stop what you're doing, and there needs to be probably additional paperwork, additional search warrants for that information. So if you're there on a drug case and you start finding child pornography or murder or something, that's beyond the scope of that investigation. So you would need to stop what you're doing and redefine the scope, figure out a way that your organization can implement the change. If you don't do that, then you're going to go way over a budget on either money or time or resources. And again, we know that in this field of forensics, there is already, a backlog of evidence to be examined. So knowing what you're there to do and having a plan to do it is extremely important. Scope creep is more common because criminal investigations are taking a more detailed examination of evidence. Again, a digital forensic investigator or examiner, they don't work for the DA, but they do work with them, and they will sometimes have to fend off attacks, like you see here, when the defense files a motion for discovery. They get a large amount of information that the forensic investigator may not have looked through, may not have sorted through, may not have accounted for in their forensic report. And the forensic investigator, the technician that's doing the investigation, they do not always end up going into the courtroom. Sometimes the only thing that's going into a courtroom or into a report that might end up being something that helps settle a criminal case, or it could be a civil case, even though discovery rules are different there. But in a criminal case, the report is going forward, not the person that was sitting there looking at the computer. And then scope creep also can come in not just on what you're looking at on that computer, but it can also come in on the number of devices, right? So you think you're going in after a computer that's been downloading Game of Thrones, but when you get there, you find stacks and stacks of hard drives and USB drives and all sorts of network storage. That's going to increase your scope dramatically if you need to look through all of that evidence. Let's see. New evidence often isn't revealed to prosecution. Yep. It's become more important for prosecution teams to ensure they have analyzed the evidence exhaustively before trial. So again, as the person that first has the evidence in a criminal case, it's up to that law enforcement officer or that examiner that works for in their public position to exhaustively look through everything that's going to be exculpatory evidence or inculpatory evidence that's going to help make the case when this report goes to a criminal trial. Then we'll go over these next 4 slides, and that will be the end of this video. The other important thing is within your scope is you need to have an approach. You have to have a playbook, or you might hear it called a run book, or you might hear it called a plan. But essentially, you need to know, you work for this type of organization. When this type of evidence comes in, this is how we handle it. We use this tool and this process. We save it here. Having all of that information known ahead of time is going to help you stay within your plan, stay within your scope. Know the materials that you need. Know which tasks you need to the approach depends largely on the type you're investigating. So if it's a criminal case, we do this. If it's a civil case, we do this. And, if I'm working for a corporate office and we have a harassment case, we do these steps. So just having that approach, and this gives us some basic steps that you can follow. The slide says for all forensics investigations, but it's going to change based on what you're doing, where you work, your organizational policies and procedures. But for an overview, this is a decent overview. For target drives, use a wiped media that's been reformatted and inspected for viruses. The reason we want to do that is we want to make sure that we're not contaminating or cross-contaminating evidence. Inventory hardware on the suspect's computers. Note the condition of the seized computer. For static acquisitions, remove the original drive and check the date and time versus the system's CMOS. So if the person's CMOS battery that's in their computer has a wrong date by a couple of days or an hour, then that's going to possibly affect your time values when you're saying like, oh, they couldn't have downloaded Sharknado at 10 p.m. because, look, they were out at the bar at 10 p.m. Well, if the CMOS time was wrong, then that 10 p.m. on their computer may not be accurate on that machine. We might have to cross that with some other evidence sources. Record how you acquired the data from the suspect drive. So this is, again, always keeping documentation and notes of what you're doing. I think that's probably one of the hardest challenges of doing this is you have this investigative nature, especially in this class, and even in the advanced class. I don't stress it as much as we could, but knowing what you did, how you did, when you did, why you did is just as important as the results that you show. Process the drive's contents methodically and logically. List all folders and files on the image or drive. And that depends on what the format of your report is going to be. If you'll actually list all the folders and files. If they're not relevant to the case, then that's going to be some of that part that gets parsed out, that gets pushed to the side, that it's not part of what we're examining in this case. Examine the content of all data files and all folders. So again, that's aspirational. There's going to be some of that's going to end up getting parsed to the side, depending on the scope of your investigation, the type of investigation. Recover file contents for all password protected files. Again, that's aspirational. There are certainly tools like Password Recovery Toolkit where we can attempt to recover passwords. And again, it's going to depend on the nature of your case if you're going to push through and continue and try to get those passwords. Identify function of every executable file that doesn't match its hash values. So that could be a place where something is hiding, right? So it could be something that isn't supposed to be there. But again, that's aspirational as well, because if you do not know the hash value of when they downloaded Warcraft version 2 and you're on Warcraft version 50 now, then you don't know what the hash value is, so there's no way to really figure out if it matches or not. Maintain control of all evidence and findings. That one is not aspirational. That one is a fact, Jack. And the last one, even if the initial plan is sound, at times you may need to deviate from it and follow evidence. Certainly, that's where that art comes into, the art and science of it. Knowing the types of data to look for helps you make the best use of your time. Again, that's knowing, what type of case you're going to have and what you're going to be looking at. It really makes a big difference. And the key is to start with a plan, but remain flexible in the face of new evidence. And that's a good plan for life, right? Have a plan, but get ready to change. So that's it on scope and following a plan. Thanks.